I see that a lot, actually. It's like this idea of digital transformation driving a lot of standardized identity approaches. Yeah, that seems like that kind of also.
Yeah, because it's when you get to the point what George was just describing where you realize, that's actually, and they call that identity and access management. Okay, yeah, we need that.
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, even at that point, we rolled out sort of a new identity platform, but all of the markets still manage their own identity platform for their local applications, for their local PCs, et cetera. So we had sort of this dichotomy of the global platform, which only got you into this extranet and subsequently any application that sort of tied in.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Steadman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, and that's a bad yourself.
People Las Vegas, baby. Las Vegas.
Vegas, baby.
What happens, and this is what I realized, when you say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, you're talking about things that you do. If you see people randomly in public doing stupid stuff, that doesn't have to stay in Vegas. You can go and tell your friends.
Yeah, they don't know you probably, and you don't know them probably, and they become a story that you tell everyone else. Remember that time with Vegas? This crazy magician? You were telling me stories last night about a magician.
Oh, unbelievable magician. So we saw Shin Lim, fantastic, mind reader.
Just by nature it is here.
Yeah, well, my nature is to try to figure out what's going on. How did he know that person's birthday was X, Y, and Z? Or how did he know, like, where they were from? Like, he pulled one lady out of the audience and said, "Oh, your accent sounds like you're from Michigan." And then he went on to name the town in Michigan that she was from, which I had never heard. It wasn't like Dearborn or Detroit or something like that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then we had a magician show up at the restaurant that we were at, and kind of the same deal where, he did all these tricks, and I was like, wow, that's really, really tricky.
Stop sliding and in misdirection.
Of course, yeah, get you there's a lot of this, like, look at my hand, and like this hand's doing something else. So,
but distracting somewhere. It's Vegas. It's probably like an explosion, and that there's something happening.
All I can tell you is, like, this stuff doesn't happen in the Augusta Church of areas. I haven't run into it yet. So
there aren't just random magicians.
No, random musicians who just show up at your table and, take your money and set it on fire. And you're just like, oh my God, I guess I'm not getting that $20 bill back.
That's the only trick, right? If we're going, where's my money gone?
Yeah, right.
Well, why don't we go ahead and get into it for this week? So we're at Identiverse. We're live. We're doing video for the first time in Identiverse. Hopefully it comes out. See, knock on wood. We've got our guest, George Roberts. He's the Global Access Identity Director at McDonald's. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for taking the time with us. Definitely want to give a shout out to RSM. Thanks for sponsoring us to get us out here and have conversations like this. Thanks to Cyberverse Alliance for giving a place to sit down, record this, a place to plug in, right? All that good stuff. But why don't we just go ahead and get into it? So Identiverse 2024. George, this is the first time you've been on the show. We all kind of about the history and the origin stories of the heroes in the States, they call it. How did you get into the wonderful world of identity and access management?
So I actually have a background mainly in software engineering, and a number of years ago, I built what later became a component of McDonald's identity and access platform as a consultant. And I was in a different role and then got an opportunity to sort of come back and take over the project that I had actually built many years ago. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So I've actually been doing identity and access focused work for the last 6 years, but I've been kind of tangent to that for my year before that. So
I noticed you kind of ping pong back and forth, boomerang, as I like to say, where I was reading your LinkedIn looking for ideas from this. you're at McDonald's, consulting, other things, McDonald's again, consulting McDonald's. What is it? They keep pulling you back, other than the French fries.
Yeah, a lot of us, we like to say we've got ketchup in our blood.
I don't know if that's healthy.
Probably not, but it's a great place to work. The culture is phenomenal. Like any big company, there's always times when there are outsourcings that happen, and I just happen to be in the wrong area at the wrong time, I guess you would say. And a couple of the ping pongs that you saw was when I had transitioned over to an external provider for McDonald's. So actually, over the last 25 years, I think I've worked for McDonald's as either a consultant or an employee for 21 of the last 25 years.
Wow.
Been there a long time.
What's the biggest change you've seen in your time there?
Wow. I think probably in general for McDonald's is that recently we've kind of come to accept the fact that we're a technology company. For a long time, technology was a cost center for McDonald's. But in recent years, with the advent of our mobile app and our kiosks in our restaurants, I think our leadership has really recognized how much of an advantage that really brings to us, and we've kind of shifted our thinking away from technology being a cost center to being a business and a perk.
You really have to have an app these days. I mean, what restaurant do you go to that doesn't have an app? I think you guys do a good job with that. And I don't usually ask our guests for favorites, but we did hear that there's you're headquartered in Chicago, am I right?
Yes.
And so you have we hear there's like a test kitchen or a test restaurant with all the international offerings. So you can go to this test kitchen. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so our global restaurant, which is, it is actually a public restaurant. It's on our first floor in our building, but it is open to the public. So if you're in Chicago, come check it out. It doesn't have all of our global offerings, but what they do is around every 3 months or so, they'll rotate some international offerings in. So they'll usually have one or two of the international sandwiches. They'll have some kind of an international side, like maybe different types of potato wedges or shake fries or other things like that, where if you haven't had the shake fries, it's like fries in a bag with a seasoning, and then you dump it in there and you shake it up, and it gets all.
That's not at all.
Yeah. No, it is not a shake and a fries, although I'm told that dipping your fries in shake is also very good.
It's acceptable. Yeah, I like that. So tell us about your typical day. I mean, what, specifically within Identity Access Management, what are the areas that you cover? And then is it like you manage a team that does those things, or are you more hands-on?
Yeah, so I lead our Identity and Access Engineering team. And so basically my team is responsible for building, maintaining, enhancing our identity and access platform for McDonald's enterprise users worldwide. So the way McDonald's operates from a sort of a day-to-day identity management perspective is a lot of that is done by our IT teams within our markets. We have 115 different markets globally. So sort of day-to-day management, password changes, etc., is done by the local markets. My team is more focused on actually building and running the identity lifecycle, IGA, password resets, MFA, all of the technical work. And so, we're always looking at, what are the newest and latest and greatest technologies available. How can we apply that to our platform to enhance both the security of McDonald's as well as the user experience of our users?
So within that store network, I mean, how many of the identity lifecycles are you responsible for? Is it everybody from the top manager all the way down to the line cooks?
Yes. So we have 2.5 million users worldwide. And that's at everyone from our CEO down to our people that are.
That's a crazy amount, 2.5 million.
Yeah.
I bet you, when you go out and buy some kind of software like an identity management technology, scalability is a real issue.
Absolutely.
Yes, I like what I see, but can you handle 2.5 million users?
Yeah, and honestly, some of the biggest challenges that we see are around the sort of the wide breadth of types of users that we have, right? Because, our corporate users, our staff people, people on my team, et cetera, they're using McDonald's laptops. We have McDonald's issued phones, so we can kind of control what that experience looks like. We can enable things like Windows Hello for Business, et cetera. But when you're talking about our crew people in our restaurants, most of them don't even work for McDonald's directly as an employee. They work for a franchisee who owns the restaurant. So we don't have as much control over what their experience is like from a device perspective, right? Because they're not getting smartphones issued to them from the company. We can't, require them to use a personal device to be able to do things like MFA and things like that. So that's where a lot of our challenges are: is how do we build or buy a platform that is going to support such a wide variance of different user types and user experiences.
Yeah. Is your team like a 24/7 operation? Do you have people like globally dispersed, or are you able to run it all from one place and just have people around the clock?
So we're right now we are sort of McDonald's employees, which are really focused more on sort of product and service management and technical direction. And then we also rely heavily on partners who do provide that 24/7 coverage to ensure the platform is up and running, handle support tickets, things like that. Okay. So we have some folks obviously on my team in Chicago and other parts of the U.S. working remotely, but we also have a team in Croatia, a team in India as well.
Oh, wow. Croatia, that's the first time I heard that come up as like a IT hub.
Yeah, it's one of our key vendors is located there. So.
Is there a particular technology or areas that really interests you right now?
Well, I mean, so later this week, I'm talking, participating in one of the keynotes on authorization. That's a big area of focus for us. Is we've kind of solved the authentication issue. We rely heavily on SAML and OpenID Connect, and it's pretty easy for us to onboard an application from an SSO perspective. It's kind of like doing 30 minutes worth of work. You plug all the variables in and away you go. But the authorization side is much more complicated. We look at it like to think it's somewhere in the 120 hours range on average for us to integrate from an authorization standpoint an application. And it's very custom. A lot of connecting directly to databases or, God forbid, doing flat file data, data transfers. I mean, it's across all over the place. So anything that is sort of aimed at solving that portion of the platform, I think is something that I'm super interested in. I'm also interested in opportunities for other ways of doing MFA or MFA-like activities, but for people who are a little bit more like frontline workers who we don't have as much control over the types of devices or the capabilities that they have. It's a big challenge for us, with as many, of those 2.5 million users that I talked about, about 1.5 to 1.6 million of them are crew members. And that can range anywhere from, a 16-year-old kid who's got their first job all the way up to, somebody who is working in, they've retired and they're just picking up a few hours.
You might have people with a lot of disabilities as well.
We do. So I mean, it ranges the gamut, right? You have maybe some kids who are more familiar with technology, maybe probably have a smartphone, but are they going to want to use it for their job at McDonald's? And then you may have other people who don't have any kind of phone, or maybe they have a old school mobile device that they could do texting on, but again, maybe they're in a country where they pay per text, and it's like, well, can you, how do you take advantage of that? So, we're always looking for new ways to try and solve that problem.
What's your take on solutions like passwordless and the hotness of that stuff?
I think passwordless is great, but it only really works when you control the devices that the user has. Like, some of the passkey support is really cool because it does kind of take away that need to a certain extent for the user to have a specific type of device. Obviously, I love Windows Hello for Business. It's great on a Windows laptop that has a Hello-based camera. But again, it only works really when you have control over that device as the company. So things like passkey, I think are really good, but still there's a lot of scenarios where you may have 20 users using shared tablet in a restaurant that's not a managed device. It's just some, an iPad that a franchisee has gone and bought, or an Android tablet that franchisee has gone and bought. And if they go and then try and access any of our web application, it's like, what's the way forward on, you don't want to try and do passkeys on shared device like that. Not my area of expertise. Maybe there's a solution for that, but I think there's still a lot of the solutions that we see are really great when you're in a sunny day situation where all of the pieces are aligned with everything that the vendor is expecting. But when you kind of look past that and you've got heterogeneous environments or things you don't have control over, they can fall
Unhappy.
the unhappy path. Exactly.
Yeah, I can imagine all the scenarios. I worked with another large fast food firm, and one of the biggest problems that they were dealing with was people who were accepted. They were supposed to start on Wednesday, and they didn't show up. So going through that whole provision process, and then, basically they had to design the process around avoiding that being a big catastrophe, because it happened all the time.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys deal with that.
Oh yeah. It's definitely a challenge that we see in our restaurants as well. If you think about it, I it's been a long time, but I can remember when I was a 16-year-old kid. A lot of times you go out there, hey, I got to get a job, and I go and apply for 3 or 4 different jobs, and whichever one of them calls me back first, I'm going to go talk to them. But then the next day, some other company calls and says, oh yeah, we'll give you 25 cents more an hour than McDonald's is going to give you. So then you just don't show up for your first day.
Right.
It's interesting when you're in a more sort of corporate setting, a lot of things are a little bit more standardized in it, and they work how you expect them to work. When people apply for a job and they get hired, then they show up for their first day, and everything kind of follows the happy path, as you said.
Yeah.
But when you start to get into retail type establishments, it gets a lot more dicey in terms of how that all works. So we have to definitely design our processes to account for that, and you know.
I would imagine it's a scenario. Jeff used the term a lot. I am heroes. When you have that kind of distributed operation like McDonald's has, it probably comes back to somebody actually really caring who's in this location, or even on your team who just like goes the extra mile to make it work, make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of work within our platform to try to address some of the unique business scenarios for McDonald's. I mentioned before that I had built sort of what became part of the platform, but it's basically a web-based portal that is almost a custom review into the identity platform for each of our restaurant organizations. So if I were a franchisee at McDonald's, I own several restaurants, my team and I could go into this portal and could see all of the user accounts that belong to my restaurants, can do things like reset passwords, can reset the MFA for our users, can give them access to various different applications. And the nice thing about that is we allow the people who are closest to the users to be able to try and solve those problems for them.
Yeah.
Versus making them call a help desk. And, then how do you validate that John Smith is actually...
It's frustrating. We've all been through it, right? I mean, I had to get a power shift for the group today, and I must have gone to 4 or 5 different people who say, go to that person. You go to that person. They say, go to this person. Eventually you get to the right person, but by the time you do, it can be you can be already pretty frustrated, pretty angry at the whole process. And it's something you want to put your users through.
Yeah. And I think, what we've found is that a lot of the sort of traditional identity management tooling works really well when you're talking about a traditional sort of enterprise scenario. But when you have a situation like ours where we have really a hugely distributed environment, right? We have 40,000 restaurants worldwide, and basically every one of those restaurants is its own little business. I mean, yes, some of our franchisees own multiple restaurants, but ultimately each one of those restaurants operates sort of independently of each other.
Really? Is that almost always the case?
Well, so I think it's something like 93% of our restaurants worldwide are owned by a franchisee or a licensee of some sort of McDonald's. McDonald's, I think, only operates about 7% of our restaurants. Ballpark. I don't know what the numbers are. They change over time as we buy and sell restaurants. But the thing is, yeah, you may have a franchisee who owns 5 or 10 restaurants, and they'll operate that obviously as a single business. But the individual restaurants themselves, you're going to have a general manager, and you're going to have other managers, and then you'll have the crew, and they operate that restaurant on a day-to-day basis, sort of independently of the other restaurants, even within their franchise. Obviously, they have oversight from their franchise organization, but in terms of how those crew members and the managers get supported, it's done basically at the restaurant.
Okay.
So, if you have a crew person who's having a problem with their identity, the first person they're going to go to is one of their managers. And we need to be able to empower those managers to be able to address and handle that issue as quickly and as easily as possible. Because, number one, identity is not their job.
Right, that's right.
Their job is running the restaurant. And so we have to streamline these things as much as we can because they need to get back to being able to run the restaurant. But we also don't want them to be on the phone calling the help desk all day.
I've just always been fascinated by the franchisee model or the dealership model or the brokerage model, because I think to your point earlier, you were talking about with the device that you lose control of the device. The franchisee can go out and buy Dells, or they can go out and buy whatever they want. And you just deal with it, right? But also, like within that network, I own 10 restaurants. I could, have some kind of hierarchy. I could own 100 restaurants, maybe sure you have some franchisees that own like hundreds of restaurants, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the exact numbers are. At least within the U.S., I think our largest ones are somewhere in the 50 restaurant range. But again, I'm not 100% sure. To some extent, we do control the hardware within the restaurants from the standpoint of like our point of sale systems and things like that are fairly standardized. There may be some options that the franchisees have for registers and other types of devices. And I think what we've tried to do over time is to sort of provide a standard set of capabilities so that the franchisees don't have to solve these problems themselves. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. To the, for the most part, I think in most areas of the world, McDonald's is actually, not necessarily providing the hardware, but specifying
specification,
and then having partners and working with those partners to provide those options to the franchisees. A little outside my area of expertise, but I do know that for the most part we standardize those things, because otherwise we provide the point of sale software. We would be able to easily support that if we were too wide of a variation.
And any other question, and this is probably way outside of your expertise, but maybe you know the answer. So when you're using the McDonald's app,
Yep.
you place an order and it says your code is, and it gives you a 4-digit code.
Yes.
All right, there's thousands of McDonald's restaurants, right? There's thousands of orders going in at a time. How is a 4-digit code enough to know that, this is Jim and he ordered X, Y, and Z?
And so standard this 4-digit code only needs to apply to the location wanting to pick it up, correct?
Yeah. So here are two smart people shorts.
Yeah. So you won't get the code until you've submitted the order, and then the order is going to be tied to the restaurant that you're submitting the order to. So they really only have to support enough ongoing orders for that one particular restaurant. You could have, theoretically, code collisions across restaurants, and it wouldn't be a problem, because what happens is when you give them that code, they put that into the point of sale system, and the combination of the restaurant and the code then pulls the order in from the digital cut. That's my understanding.
Okay, that makes sense. That 4-digit code wouldn't scale, but
it wouldn't. But it's like, how do you find, again, from a user experience perspective, how do you find the right balance? Because you're reading out a 16-digit code
Through a speaker.
Yeah, no. That was an H.
Yeah, right.
H and what the hell?
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about Identiverse. I think we were talking before we started. You mentioned you were here last year.
Yeah,
right. So it's your second Identiverse.
Second.
What brought you back?
I really enjoyed the conference last year. Obviously I love being involved in any kind of community events, right? Obviously this is a big part of the identity and access community, and being able to participate in these types of events, to be able to come and talk with people that are sort of working in the same industry, I think is invaluable, because the sessions are great, right? You get to hear and you hear about new things that are coming, and hear how other people have addressed problems. But even just if you were to get together or come and talk to the people, walking through the exhibit hall with the sponsors and stuff, beginning to talk to other practitioners in the industry, I think it's hugely valuable just to be able to network and make connections.
Then you start to recognize a lot of these folks.
Absolutely.
They've been here for years and years, or other conferences, things like that. Yeah. So the hallway conversations are always one of the highlights for me, at least. That's not something you can replicate,
right?
Like or a webinar or something like that.
Well, and it's hard too, because even if you know and have the contact info for some other people in the industry, they're busy, right? You know, that they're tied up with their own things, and we hate to kind of like inject yourself into their daily grind. But when everybody has taken the time to, to come to a certain place, it's an opportunity to really, hear talk identity, to meet new people, to learn new things and see new things, all that kind of stuff. And we're in Vegas, right? So, it stays in Vegas, and it may not stay in Vegas, but. Well, I mean, the thing that I've always enjoyed too is, I spend a lot of time on social media trying to, just understand what's going on and see what other people are talking about. And you have conversations with people on social media, whether that be, through a public, chat with comments or whatever, or if you're having maybe even a direct private conversation. But the relationship with that person changes drastically when you've talked with them in person. Even if it's just like for a few minutes. I attended I told you I come from a software engineering background. I've attended a lot of Microsoft events over the years. And I had been chatting with a gentleman from their identity team for months or even years on Twitter, or on the service formerly known as Twitter. And we had never met in person. And I happened to run into him at one of the Microsoft events, and we chatted for 5-10 minutes. The relationship that we then had on Twitter subsequent to that changed drastically. It was no longer just some random person who he was chatting with. It was somebody who he knew, who he had met, and you could tell just in the willingness to actually have a little bit more depth to a conversation. So that's very insightful,
because a lot of these conferences, well, you're seeing it less. They used to be, there was a virtual option, right? First it was virtual only, then it was virtual option. Now you're seeing a lot of that go away, which makes sense. People could travel and be together out. But the benefit is what you just said, making that connection. Now you're more than just a picture and a tagline on screen. You're a person that I've had an interaction with.
Yeah, I really love when the conferences do sort of a combination of virtual and in person, because then I can go attend in person and can focus on the networking aspects and not worry so much about the sessions, because I can always come back afterwards and watch the sessions.
That's right. Or something like this, and you go watch it.
Right. Well, because, what's the difference if I'm there in person watching it or watching it recorded? But being able to go talk to people and actually have a conversation is a lot harder to do virtual.
Or even like in between sessions, right? There's like 4 different sessions all taking place right that you want to be at. I think it should be a mandatory thing. If you're running the conference, you should have some sort of recording or something taking place where you can watch whatever you missed. I saw somewhere out there they're doing some sort of AI summer too as well around things. I don't know what that means. Identiverse now with 100% more AI.
I mean, you know what? I mean, if you slap a little AI on it, it's got to be better.
Right. Yeah, that's got to be better. Let's talk about your keynote Friday. So the time people listen to this, I'll probably pass it blank, but the future of authorization. You mentioned early on that authorization websites are really interesting to you, like a area that needs to be solved for still, and I'm pulling your view on that. Give us a little synopsis of what the talk about it.
Yeah, so I will say I am a very small part of the keynote. It's mainly Sarah from AWS and Peter from Microsoft.
And Sarah's been popping her head in, by the way. If I see us like motioning and stuff like that, she can go across the...
I actually met with Sarah earlier this morning. I need to go over the talk, and she said say hello. So they're obviously working very, very closely together on a lot of standards around authorization. And where I'm participating is I'm going to be the problem child. I'm actually going to just talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we see at McDonald's with authorization. I think I mentioned earlier, super expensive for us to integrate applications when it comes to authorization. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, and none of them are right. But it's just the way I'm looking at it is if I were to have a wish, like I would love for there to be some way to make authorization closer to as easy as doing authentication.
Mm-hmm. A lot of standards.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you can go to a SaaS vendor and say, hey, what do you guys support for SSO? And they all go, oh yeah, we support OpenID Connect or we support SAML and maybe some others, but those are the two that we care about. And, you plug it in, it's a little bit of work for our team to do, 30 minutes an hour work of setup, work with the app team and do some testing, make sure everything is good. And then, okay, great. You've got authentication ready to go. But authorization is orders of magnitude more difficult. And so the keynote really is talking about some of the work that's being done in the industry on trying to standardize, the authorization story. I don't think we're at a point yet where we go, hey, we have a solution to all of these problems. But I think that what we're recognizing is we've largely solved most of the authentication challenges.
Big ass area, too many faces.
What's real interesting, I think, from an authorization standpoint is, I guess probably this is the first time I'm thinking about this. It's kind of where the authentication issue was 10, 15 years ago. The problem is applications are designed to be standalone.
Right.
Like if you have a single sign-on, great, we can integrate, but you don't have to have it. You can log in on our screen, and we have these roles or reaps or entitlements, whatever you want to call them, but it's this combination, and then that's what our application expects. Now, replacing authentication was just that thin layer on top. Replacing authorization, or not replacing, but fully integrating to, and you have n number of applications all designed different ways.
It's a bigger story.
Challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the sort of where we're at today is we're trying to solve sort of that common language. We with SAML and OAuth, OpenID Connect, we have a common language that we can use for authentication today. And when you have an application, you want to enable it on SSO, you now have a standard you can plug in. But you're right, though, that authorization is much more complicated because every application does its own thing. But I think if we can get to a common language or a common set of languages that can be supported, you can hopefully get the application vendors to a point where they're starting to think about authorization in a consistent way because you have languages that work in a certain way. Because we didn't have those languages, everybody was left to sort of fend for themselves in terms of how they're going to do authorization within their app. And of course, you have, one problem, but 99 different ways to solve it. That's kind of where we're at today. So I think the first thing we have to do is solve the language problem. And then once we have that and we can show like, hey, these identity platforms now support these languages, now we can start to go to the app vendors and say, let's figure out how to get you on board. Because like authentication, it will make your life easier. It will make your customers' lives easier because they'll be able to plug in a lot better.
Well, the good news is that folks like yourself and others like Sarah and many, many others, I'm not going to try and go through the whole list, but there's so many people focused on authorization now. You didn't see that 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think if you look at it, the proliferation of applications is contributing to this, right? If you look 10 years ago, like our application estate at McDonald's was much smaller. I mean, we still had a lot of applications. We're a big enterprise, but it was much smaller than it is today. We're for over 1,000 applications. So imagine trying to integrate 1,000 applications that are out doing their thing, their own way, and it's challenging.
Well, the next part of the puzzle to solve, right? We have fixed authentication. We're done. Great. That's not going to be any better. If that's not where it's standardized, yeah. What's next? Part of the authentication, there is the next step is authorization. So here we are with that frame. And, I guess I'm a little bit pessimistic because we do need application developers to get a hold of this. I don't know how we're going to go back and retrofit without some sort of crazy middleware. And there are some things that probably help that, but we're probably looking at 10, 15 years from now is really when we're going to look back on it. If we start now and say, let's start standardizing the way we do authorizations, or at least coming up with some framework, because you've got so many different ways to do it. Well, here it's transaction based, maybe it's FAP, it's a key code, natural directory, it's a group, and another application there, a SaaS-based app maybe, and it's a specific entitlement name, right? I wish it would get better faster, but the realist in me and the pessimist side of me looks at it as like probably going to 10 to 15 years. Those apps have to catch up.
I mean, I think you're probably right to get to a point where we're at today with authentication in terms of being able to say it's largely a solved problem, right? Authentication, we're not going to say like it's solved everywhere and for every scenario, but by and large, we can look at it and go, well, hey, you know what? There's common tooling, there's common standards that people can use to plug in, and it's largely a solved problem from a technical perspective. Now, maybe not everything is using it, or maybe there's some edge cases. So I think you're probably right, but I think there's a lot of value even in if you were to get commonly accepted standards for authorization, and you were to get the identity platforms to support it, and even some of the large vendors to support it, which is probably what you'll get early on. There's going to be a long tail, right, of applications, how long it takes them to bring out support for it. But I think, even if you can get some of the major players on board, that there's a lot of huge value to that. Especially when you talk about enterprise type, regulatory type applications. If you could get them on board, there's huge value for industry for that. So
you've got another step coming up this week because you're busy today. One McDonald's way, the global identity and access journey at McDonald's. What's that about?
Yeah, so McDonald's, we're in 115 markets, and historically McDonald's sort of operated as 115 different businesses. I mentioned that I've been with McDonald's for a long time. I actually started in corporate in 2000, and when I started, there was no global IT. There was corporate IT, which was focused on like a mainframe and our financial systems for how the corporation ran. And then every market had their own IT, from the U.S. market, which had a fairly sizable IT because they're like a third of our restaurants. But you had some markets that it's like one guy in a closet somewhere running IT for the entire market because they're a smaller market. But every market did their own thing. We didn't have a global identity platform. In fact, when I was fairly new, I think I was maybe only a year in, we rolled out the first global identities because we were trying to roll out an extranet and realize that we didn't have an identity that everybody could use to sign in to this website that we were going to use to disseminate information.
I see that a lot, actually. It's like this idea of digital transformation driving a lot of standardized identity approaches. Yeah, that seems like that kind of also.
Yeah, because it's when you get to the point what George was just describing where you realize, that's actually, Oh, and they call that identity and access management. Okay, yeah, we need that.
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, even at that point, we rolled out sort of a new identity platform, but all of the markets still manage their own identity platform for their local applications, for their local PCs, et cetera. So we had sort of this dichotomy of the global platform, which only got you into this extranet and subsequently any application that sort of tied in to that same platform. But how people logged into their PCs was a completely different ID. So you had people with two different IDs, with two different passwords. And eventually some of our, like the US market and corporate said, oh, well, since we're running both of these things, why don't we synchronize the password between the two? But you still had two different IDs.
And technically two still passwords, but it was quasi sync.
Exactly. But it was literally, one was in Active Directory and one was in like Nobel Identity Manager directory. But yeah, they were synchronizing passwords. So at that point, we still had effectively 115, 120 different ways of doing identity. Right? You had a central team that managed the global identity portion, but that wasn't really a global identity platform because it was really only used for accessing those websites. Over time, we got some of our major markets sort of standardized on a single Active Directory, but it took us up until end of 2022 to actually get everybody onto a standard platform running through the same business processes, the same identity lifecycle processes and everything. But we really kicked that process off in 2019, and over the course of 4 years, we onboarded 100 markets and something like almost 2 million user IDs on the platform in like 4 years. So that's what my talk is going to be about, is really just kind of talking through what that process looked like, how we did it, how we structured the program to actually do that, because it was an insane amount of work to try and work with all of these different markets to bring them on board. And we obviously couldn't do it in a custom way for every single market because there was no way we could do it. And then, I'll talk through a few of the lessons learned and sort of what's next for McDonald's.
Good stuff. We've been talking here about 45 minutes. Kind of the calm before the storm of Identiverse. It's, 10, 20 a.m. Phoenix time, because the people kind of coming and going. So we're kind of like, what do we look at doing that room? We're talking the actual conference. Technically, I guess, starts tonight with the keynote. So we want to let you get on and at least get an app in before the shenanigans start around here. Would you say that the sausage, egg, and cheese McGriddle is the pinnacle of McDonald's innovation?
So, pinnacle of McDonald's innovation.
Because I could tell you right now, I think it is. I don't know how you beat that.
So, I will say my kids love the sausage, egg, and cheese McGriddle. That is by far their favorite breakfast. I'm more of a breakfast burrito kind of guy myself, because what could be better than eggs and sausage and peppers and roll up and tie tortilla with the salsa and there's exactly. Yeah, I mean, the little syrup injected pancake. It literally is a whole breakfast in one sandwich. So yeah, I could see that. I could agree with that statement.
What do you say to someone when they've never been to McDonald's and you say, what's the thing that they should try?
Wow. I mean, who is this?
Right. Not actually. That's not sure if he likes this.
I guess so I think you got to go with the classics, right? If you're talking about breakfast, you gotta try the egg.
I'm not a Muppet guy. Too plain.
Yeah.
I loved them when I was a kid, but now that you have the McGriddle, and by the way, it doesn't have to be just sausage. Anything you put on a McGriddle, it's wonderful.
Yeah, honestly, you could really try it for breakfast because the breakfast menu is awesome. I'd miss all day breakfast. But obviously, and for lunch, you got to try the fries.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no two ways around how to eat fries. And I would say our quarter pounder with cheese, because
My go-to.
we switched over to fresh beef for quarter pounder with cheese a number of years ago, and it's like that day. The quality of the fresh beef versus the frozen beef is just, our frozen beef is good. It's good quality. It's just, there's something about the and fresh beef.
Crispy chicken deluxe, that's my too. So
Yeah.
here's one for you. Overrated or underrated fish fillet sandwich?
I gotta say overrated because I don't like fish very much.
I'm like, yeah.
Not at all. But I do know that there are lots of people that love them.
And it's probably underrated. I never get it, but
Wait a second. How can you say it's underrated?
I haven't met that many people that like it.
Okay.
So I think like the rating is very low. That is among society. It's got to be better than I like fish.
We sell an awful lot of it.
It's just when I get to McDonald's, I'm like, certain things, and fish sandwich doesn't come to mind for me. But yeah, I'm thinking probably.
Well, and it's the only sandwich we have that uses a steamed bun. All of our other sandwiches use toasted buns.
Okay.
But the fish fillet has a steamed bun.
And now we're getting
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at the history, but there's something about it makes it like super pillowy and okay. I guess maybe because the fish is kind of a lighter protein versus like a bigger chicken. It's more dense, and so because the fish is lighter to fluff. I'd have to ask my buddy Chef Mike Harass, I think it's how you pronounce his last name. He's a former McDonald's chef, and he's out on social media answering all the McDonald's questions. So
I'd be a good one for throwing out TikTok or something like that.
Exactly.
That's a good pub trivia quiz. What is the only McDonald's item that does not have a toasted one? Right? No.
Yeah, that would be.
All right. What do you think? Should we wrap it up there?
I think we should wrap it up. We can't take up too much George's time.
Either. Just get on there.
Busy Identiverse ahead. Yeah.
I appreciate you guys having.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to us. And we'll see you walk in the halls, and we'll be doing the same thing. So definitely appreciate taking time.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So we'll go ahead and leave it there for this conversation, I think. So this was kind of kick off of our Identiverse 2024 series. It's a plan, I think, right now is episodes pretty much all of next week as I get back to get these edited and kind of pushed out the door. But that was it. So our first foray into video, we got cameras, we got some microphones, we got an open door. People were kind of coming in and not quite sure what's going on there. They think that it's true live, true. I don't know. So, do a live, as they say in the biz. But go ahead and come on in and listen to us, like, subscribe. We're building up a YouTube channel. So I know Jim is very interested in making sure that the YouTube plug out.
If you did, I was going to have it. It's ready. I was ready.
So youtube.com/@IDAC podcast brings you to our channel. Our website, idacpodcast.com. Our Twitter, X, whatever it's called, display at IDAC Podcasts. Mastodon, IDAC Podcast at infosec.exchange. And we're on LinkedIn. George will have your LinkedIn as well in our show notes so that people can reach out. Awesome. Yeah, either give you grief over your McDonald's items or commiserate with you on the authorization stuff and things like that. So with that, we'll go ahead and leave it. Thanks for watching and or listening, and we'll talk to you on the next talk.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.